Montana Territory, 1883. The wind came cruel and sharp off the plains the morning Ryder Zane rode into the mining town of Dry Creek, his coat dusted with trail dirt and his horse wet with sweat. He had not come looking for trouble, but trouble had a way of finding a man like him. The saloon door creaked wide as he stepped in. Cigarette smoke curled under the low ceiling, and the piano player stopped mid-note. Ryder's boots echoed on the warped floorboards as he walked toward the bar, but it was not the whiskey he was after. It was the girl. She stood in the far corner, arms tied behind a splintered post, her face swollen with the kind of bruises made by cowardly hands. Her dress was torn at the hem, her lips split, but her eyes, those sharp, defiant eyes, met his without flinching. "She ain't worth $5, said the man beside her, a greasy fellow with a gold tooth and a voice that slithered. Ryder looked at him, then back at the girl. He pulled out a worn leather pouch, tossed $20 in gold coins onto the table, and said, "Then I'll give you 20 and walk away." The coins clattered loud in the silence. The man blinked. "You serious? She walks out of here with me. Now." The man hesitated, but greed always moved quicker than pride. He scooped up the coins, nodded, and untied her without another word. Ryder stepped forward, steady and quiet, catching her just before she stumbled. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low. "Eliza," she whispered. "Eliza North." "I'm Ryder. You're safe now." She looked at him, uncertain, but she nodded once. That was all he needed. He led her out into the sunlight, her steps slow, her jaw clenched tight against pain. They rode west, away from Dry Creek. She rode double behind him, her arms wrapped weakly around his waist, her head pressed to the back of his shoulder. He did not ask questions. Not yet. By dusk, they reached a quiet patch of land near the river, where cottonwoods leaned over the water and the wind had softened. Ryder set up camp, lit a fire, and handed her a tin cup of broth. She took it with trembling hands, sipping slow. "Why were you tied up?" he asked gently. "They said I was stealing," she said. "But I was just trying to get food for my boy. He's 6. His name's Beckett." Ryder's brow furrowed. "Where is he now?" "With a woman outside of town. I was supposed to be gone an hour. That was 3 days ago." He stood without a word, walked to his saddlebag, and pulled out his map. "You remember how to get there?" She nodded quickly, her eyes bright with hope now. "We ride at first light," he said. She stared at him. "Why are you helping me?" Ryder met her gaze. "Because no one else did." That night, she slept wrapped in his spare blanket, close to the fire. Ryder slept sitting up, rifle across his lap, watching the trees. He did not sleep much. He did not need to. By morning, they were mounted again. The sun rose behind them as they cut across the hills, and by late afternoon, they reached the outskirts of a ramshackle homestead nestled under a bluff. Eliza dismounted before he'd even stopped. She ran to the door, pounded once, and it swung open. A boy with wild brown curls and bright eyes launched himself into her arms. "Beckett!" she cried, hugging him so tight her hands shook. The older woman who'd been watching him stepped out, her hands on her hips. "I was about to take him to the sheriff. Figured you were dead." "I almost was," Eliza said, her voice tight. Ryder stepped forward. "She's not going back to Dry Creek." The woman looked him over, took in the revolver at his hip, and nodded. "Then you best get far from here." They rode again, this time with Beckett in front of Eliza on the saddle, his small arms wrapped around the horn. He looked up at Ryder, frowning. "You the one who helped Mama?" "I am." Beckett nodded. "Good. She needed someone." That night, they camped on the edge of a wide field, the boy curled up between them, fast asleep. Eliza sat with her knees drawn up, the firelight dancing across her face. "I thought I'd never see him again," she whispered. Ryder looked at her, really looked. "You would have found a way." She turned her eyes to him. "You risked a lot for someone you didn't know." "I saw you, Eliza." That was enough. Her breath caught. She did not say anything more that night, but when they lay down to sleep, she reached out and touched his hand. He laced their fingers together, and for the first time in a long time, she slept through the night. By the time they reached the edge of the Bitterroot foothills, the last of the winter snow had thinned into patches beneath the pines. The trail narrowed between dark stands of fir, and the wide, open sky shrank to a ribbon above them. Ryder rode ahead, guiding the gelding with quiet pressure, while Eliza kept Beckett close in the saddle behind her, one hand steady on the reins, the other wrapped around her boy's middle. They'd ridden for 3 days since leaving the woman's homestead, following a path Ryder knew from years ago, when the land was wilder and the hills less watched. He didn't say much, only what needed saying. Eliza didn't press. They were both trying to figure out what came next, and neither had the words for it yet. That fourth morning, light broke slow over the mountains, gold bleeding through the mist. Ryder halted at a rise in the land and pointed to a small valley tucked between 2 ridges. A creek ran through it, shallow and glinting. A cabin stood near the bend, its roof sagging in one corner, chimney still and cold. "It's been empty a while," he said. "Belonged to an old couple I helped once. They passed on last spring." Eliza pulled her shawl tighter. "Will anyone come looking for it?" He shook his head. "Land's not claimed. No one nearby for miles." Beckett shifted in his seat, blinking up at the soft smoke of morning. "Will we stay here?" Ryder dismounted and took the boy down gently. "If your ma wants to. Long enough to rest, leastways." Eliza said nothing, but she followed him down the slope with careful steps, her eyes fixed on the cabin. She paused at the door, ran her fingers over the frame. The wood was dry and splintered. The latch stuck, but Ryder knocked it loose with the heel of his hand. Inside, the air smelled of pine dust and long silence. There was a stove, rusted but solid, and a table with 2 chairs, one missing a leg. A narrow bed sat in the corner, the blanket faded to gray. Eliza stood in the middle of the room and turned slowly, her expression unreadable. "We can make it livable," she said finally. "If we clean it up." Ryder nodded once. "I'll fetch water." They worked without speaking much. Ryder patched the roof while Eliza scrubbed the inside, Beckett handing her rags and chasing spiders from the corners with a stick. By the second evening, they'd made a fire in the stove, and the air inside was warm for the first time. Eliza sat on the step, sleeves rolled, hands raw from scrubbing. Beckett lay on a folded blanket behind her, already asleep. Ryder sat nearby, whittling a piece of pine into the shape of a bird. "You were here before," she said. He didn't look up. "A few years back. Helped the old man dig a well. Stayed 2 nights. You always help strangers?" "Only when I see myself in them." She watched the horizon. The last light was slipping behind the ridge, streaking the sky in rust and lavender. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," she said. "I had a plan. Get to Dry Creek, find work, save enough to send for Beckett. None of that worked." "You're here," Ryder said. "That counts for something." She pulled her knees up and wrapped her arms around them. "I don't have coin. I don't have land. I'm a woman with no name worth knowing in a place that doesn't care if I last the winter." "You got your boy," Ryder said. "And you got this valley. That's more than most." She turned to him then, really turned, and studied his face in the low light. "You don't ask much," she said. "I've asked enough of this world already." He paused, then set the carving aside and stood. "There's a root cellar behind the cabin. Needs clearing. I'll take Beckett with me tomorrow. Teach him how to set a snare line along the creek." Eliza blinked. "He's never done anything like that." "Well," Ryder said, "he'll learn." She rose too, brushing dirt from her skirt. "You don't owe us anything." "I know." He's growing attached. "I noticed." "And me?" He met her eyes then, quiet and still as a stone. "You're not running," he said. "That's more than I thought I'd find in this world." Her breath caught, but she didn't answer. Instead, she turned and went inside, laying down beside Beckett and pulling the blanket up to his chin. Ryder stayed on the step a while longer, watching the dark roll in. When he finally stepped inside, he lay down near the hearth, not too close, not far either. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't dream of gunfire or blood. The wind shifted on the 5th morning, carrying the scent of thawing earth and melting pine sap. Ryder rose early, moving through the trees behind the cabin with a shovel across his shoulder and a coil of snare wire in his hand. Beckett padded behind him, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, but eager. Eliza leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching until they vanished into the woods. Alone, she turned to the hearth and knelt, coaxing the fire back from its embers. The silence pressed around her, not heavy, not cold, just unfamiliar. For the first time in months, no voices shouted, no doors slammed, no boots scraped the dirt behind her. She could hear birdsong. Her hands stilled over the kindling. She didn't know what to do with peace. Outside, she cleared the patch of earth near the cabin's side wall. Beneath the frost-bitten weeds, she found a row of old onion bulbs, soft and forgotten. She dug them up carefully, then turned the soil with a rock, testing the ground's gift. The sun warmed her back, and in the quiet rhythm of the work, her breath grew even. When the men returned near midday, Beckett's arms were full of kindling and his chin was streaked with creek mud. Ryder carried a string of rabbits slung over his shoulder and the faintest scratch down his jaw. "What happened?" she asked, nodding toward the mark. He set the rabbits down and dusted his hands. Beckett found a fox den. Didn't know to give her space. The boy grinned. "We didn't get bit. But the fox sure told us off." Ryder looked at Eliza. "You find anything?" "Old onions. Might be good for planting, if they've still got life in them." He nodded once. "We'll try them." That evening, after the meal, Beckett curled up in the bed with a wooden horse Ryder had carved while the boy slept the night before. Eliza sat on the floor, her back to the wall, mending a tear in her sleeve with thread she'd found in a cracked tin near the stove. "You said you'd been here before," she said without looking up. "Was that before the war or after?" "After. I was too young to wear blue or gray." She glanced over. "How young?" 17, when they signed the surrender. "I just buried my father." She set the needle aside. "Your mother?" "Died giving birth to my sister. She didn't live either." Eliza was quiet a moment. Then she said, "You've been alone a long time." "I guess I have." She leaned her head back against the log wall. "I was 16 when I married. My father traded me for 2 mules and a wagon tongue. Didn't ask me first." Ryder didn't interrupt. He drank through both mules by winter. "My husband was 10 years older and mean when he felt small, which was most of the time." "Beckett's his." She nodded. "Only good thing that came of it." Ryder's gaze dropped to his hands, calloused and rough. "He's a strong boy. Got his mother's grit." Eliza let out a breath. "I've been waiting years for someone to call it grit instead of trouble." He looked up then. "You're not trouble, Eliza." She held his eyes. "Neither are you." The fire between them cracked softly, throwing gold light against the walls. She folded her hands in her lap and said, "I don't know if this place is meant for forever." "It doesn't have to be," he said. "But it can be long enough, if you want it." Her eyes softened, but she didn't smile. Instead, she stood and crossed the room in bare feet, stopping just before him. He rose too, taller than her by a head, but he didn't reach for her. "I don't need saving," she said. "I know. I don't want a man to fix things for me. I wouldn't ask you to let me. I just want a place to put down what's heavy." "You can put it here," he said. She stepped closer. Their breath mingled, slow and steady. Her fingers brushed the edge of his coat, and for a moment, she leaned into the space between them, not needing words. He laid his palm against her back, and she rested her forehead to his chest. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. Inside, the fire burned low and steady. The boy slept on, and 2 people who had never known what it meant to be chosen stood still, side by side, in the quiet shelter of something beginning. Neither pulled away. Eliza woke to the soft hush of snow falling on the roof. Spring had seemed near only days ago, but Montana weather held no loyalty to the calendar. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake Beckett, and wrapped the quilt around her shoulders. The wood in the stove had burned down to ash, and the room was cold enough to turn her breath to fog. Ryder wasn't in the cabin. She stepped outside barefoot, the cold biting her toes, and found him near the tree line, splitting logs with his coat open and his sleeves rolled. Snow clung to his hair, the axe rising and falling in a steady rhythm. "You didn't hear the wind change?" she asked. He paused, resting the axe against his thigh. "Felt it in my ribs before it came." She smiled faintly. "You always know when it's coming?" "Not always. Just enough to keep from starving." She stepped closer, snow soaking into the hem of her dress. "You're going to freeze with your arms bare." He glanced down at the red marks on his forearms. "I've had worse." "I'm sure you have. That doesn't make it wise." He looked at her then, eyes darker in the dim morning light. "Not much in my life's been wise. I'd like to try, though." She didn't answer right away. "Then, would you stay?" "If I asked." "I haven't gone." She reached for the axe handle and took it from him without asking. "Then come inside. I'll finish the kindling." He didn't argue. He brushed the snow off his shoulders and ducked into the cabin while she worked. The weight of the axe steadied her hands. Each log split clean beneath her swing, and when she carried the stacked wood inside, she found Ryder kneeling by the stove, coaxing a flame from dry pine and scrap bark. Beckett stirred under the quilt, then sat up with a yawn. "It's snowing?" "Just a little," Eliza said. "But enough to keep us inside." Ryder leaned back on his heels. "You ever taught him how to read?" Eliza hesitated. "I tried, but we never stayed in one place long enough for it to take." Ryder stood and reached for his saddlebag. From it, he pulled a book with a cracked leather cover. "It's a primer. Letters, numbers, that sort of thing. Used to belong to my uncle." Beckett scooted closer, peering at the cover. "Can I try?" Ryder sat cross-legged beside him. "You can do more than try." Eliza watched from the doorway as the two of them bent over the book. Beckett traced letters with his fingertip, and Ryder corrected him gently when he slipped. The fire warmed the room again, and the snow kept falling, soft and slow. Later, while Beckett napped again, Ryder carved a notch in a piece of pine, measuring it against the window frame. "You planning something?" Eliza asked. "Shutters, in case the wind picks up more." She leaned against the doorframe and crossed her arms. "You always make yourself useful." He didn't look up. "I don't know how to be still." "You don't have to prove anything here." He set the plank aside. "Maybe not to you. You think you're still being weighed? I think I've always been. By someone somewhere." She came closer and sat on the floor beside the half-made shutter. "Then let me say it plain. You don't have to earn your place here, Ryder. You already have it." He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "I've never had anyone say that out loud. You have now." He reached for her hand, slow and careful, and she let him take it. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, and for the first time, he leaned in. She met him halfway. The kiss was quiet. No urgency, no fire. Just warmth, and something steady beneath it, like a fence post sunk deep in the earth. When they pulled back, neither looked away. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "We find out together." She nodded. "That's enough for me." And for the rest of that day, the snow kept falling, but inside the cabin, the world felt still and sure. The snow melted fast once the sun returned. By the second week of April, the creek ran high and urgent, swollen with runoff, and the earth had softened enough to show the first green shoots pushing up through the thaw. Eliza stood barefoot near the edge of the field, sleeves rolled past her elbows, scattering carrot seeds in slow, careful rows while Beckett followed behind with a tin pail of water, pouring where she pointed. Ryder worked further up the slope, driving fence posts into the ground with a short-handled maul. He paused now and then to check the line, measuring by sight, then returned to the rhythm of hammer and earth. When the sun reached its peak, he set the tool aside and walked down toward the garden. "You'll get sunburnt," he said, glancing at Eliza's bare arms. "Let it come," she said, wiping her hands on her skirt. "It's good to feel the sun again." Ryder crouched beside her, brushing dirt from the rim of the pail. "You're planning to grow enough for more than the three of us. I'm tired of scraping by one meal at a time." She looked out over the patch of turned soil. "If we can fill the root cellar, maybe even dry some for winter, then we don't have to worry when the storms come." He studied her profile. "You're thinking long-term. I haven't had that luxury before." Ryder reached for her hand, still streaked with soil, and turned it over in his. "You do now?" That night, Beckett fell asleep before the sun had fully set, worn out from the day's tasks. Eliza sat at the table, mending the hem of a pillowcase they'd found in the loft. Ryder brought in 2 chairs he'd finished sanding and set them by the hearth. "I thought we could use something better than crates," he said. She ran her fingers along the smooth grain. "They're beautiful." He sat down across from her, elbows on his knees. "You ever think about what you'd do if you didn't have to worry about surviving?" She tied off her thread and set the needle down. "I'd have a place like this, with land that remembers me. A few hens, a cow if we could manage it. Teach Beckett letters, maybe even get him a Bible of his own one day. And you?" I'd breathe easier. Sleep deeper. Stop looking over my shoulder. He nodded. "That's something I want too. You said once you didn't know how to be still." "I didn't, but I think I'm learning." She stood and crossed to him. "You've been carving more lately. Even when there's no need. It quiets my hands." She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small figure of fox, its tail curved, its face alert. Beckett found this under his blanket. You didn't mention giving it to him. I didn't need to. He started calling you Pa when he talks about you to himself. Ryder looked away briefly, then back. I don't want to take what isn't mine. You didn't take it. You earned it. She stepped between his knees and rested her hands on his shoulders. You've been more of a father to him these past weeks than he's ever known. He brought a hand to her waist. And to you? She smiled, soft and sure. You've been everything I didn't dare ask for. Ryder stood, crowding the space between them. Then I'll ask now. Stay? Not just until the season turns or the boy's grown. Stay for good. Eliza's breath caught, but only for a moment. You want a wife? I want you. As my partner. My equal. My heart. She leaned into him, eyes bright. Then you have me. They kissed slow and certain, no hesitation, no questions left unanswered. The fire burned warm beside them, and somewhere in the quiet, the wind rustled the new leaves outside the cabin walls. That summer, they built a henhouse together. Beckett named the chickens after fabled outlaws and saints in equal measure. Ryder expanded the fence line, and Eliza added herbs to the garden: sage, yarrow, and lemon balm. She taught Beckett how to press flowers in an old Bible, and Ryder taught him how to read the stars. In late August, they rode to the nearest town, a day's journey by wagon, and stood before the circuit preacher with hands clasped, Beckett beside them, solemn and proud. The ring Ryder offered had belonged to his mother. Eliza wore it without needing words. By the first snowfall of their second year, the root cellar was full. The cabin had new shutters and a second bed built from pine and care. Nights were filled with laughter and long silences, braided together like strands of rope. Ryder still rose early, still kept his rifle by the door. But his hands no longer trembled when the wind rose, and Eliza no longer flinched at the sound of distant riders. They had no riches, but they had a home. They had each other. And that, at last, was everything.